Hello and welcome to the Paul Weller Fan Podcast. I'm Dan Jennings, and here we are, a very special episode of the podcast in the week leading up to the release of Paul Weller's brand new album, Find El Dorado. An album, yes, of cover versions, but more than that, deeply personal reinterpretations and what's been described as more of a map of his emotional and musical DNA. The album's produced by the uber talent that is Steve Cradock, and there are guest appearances by people like Declan O'Rourke. Love Declan, he's coming up very soon on the podcast. Amelia Coburn, ditto. Noel Gallagher, Sekou Kayeta, and Robert Plant. So who do we get on this episode of the podcast? Well, here's the fella who wrote the liner notes for the album, the fabulous Pete Paphides. We'll also touch on the brand new Uncut magazine cover story as well that Pete has created. And yes, that question. Make sure you listen all the way through the podcast for that. Let's get into it. Pete Paphides, lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you as well, Dan. Yeah, absolutely. You're looking really well.
Oh, well, bless you, my friend. I mean, does that mean fat? That usually means fat, doesn't it? Oh, Rosie.
No, it can mean either, can't it? Because, you know, there are definitely times when I've lost weight and people don't want to, just in case I've got like 7 months to live or something.
Yeah.
And they say, you're looking really well because... So it can definitely go either way. In this regard, it doesn't mean it means that you're looking fresh of face and you're looking happy and you're looking ebullient. And what more is there?
What more do you need in life? Look, thank you for joining me to talk about a new Paul Weller album. I mean, we could do these, it feels like every kind of 18 months, right? It's ridiculous. But this one you have a special connection with because Mr. Weller's asked you to write the sleeve notes. Is that right? The liner notes?
He has, yeah. And it was, it's great, really, because I think he sort of knew what he wanted, but he also couldn't really explain what he wanted. And I thought that he knew what he wanted, but I couldn't really explain to him what I thought he wanted, but I sort of knew what it needed to be. So we had this very sort of weird conversation where I was just like, I think I can picture it because there's a long tradition of liner notes. I love a liner note. I love buying a record that has liner notes and I love reading them as I go. So to be in that position is an absolute, with one of your favourite artists, is an absolute privilege.
How did the request come? Was it a text or was it a call from Mooney or what? You remember?
I think it was him. I think he called me. Yeah, he called me. He sort of wanted it to be about the songs primarily. He wanted it to be a celebration of the songs. And he said, if I can possibly get hold of the people who wrote them or played on them, then that'd be great. And then I went away and I called him back and I said, Paul, I've got a bit of a problem. Most of them are dead. I think he must have had the track listing close to hand. He sort of like, there was a little pause there. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're right, actually.
Well, I had the same thought with the podcast. I was like, oh yeah, it'd be really good. I could speak to the original artists on every one of these songs. And then as you go through, you're like, nope, gone. Okay, yeah.
I know, it's a disproportionately heavy load for Brian Prothero to bear. So,
and I have chatted with him hilariously.
Good. What was he like?
He was lovely. Brilliant. The brilliant thing is obviously he's a really well-known voiceover as well. So his beautiful voice is the one you could just...
I know. Did you feel like going to the toilet halfway? Somehow it was going.
Exactly. Talk about my relationship with my missus.
That's a reference to First Dates, which is the program that he does the voiceover for.
How many of the songs did you? I mean, you're such a muser. You would have known every one of these songs, I'd imagine, right?
People always say that to me, and I just keep very quiet about the stuff I don't know. So only talk about what you know, and then people will assume that you'll know stuff about the stuff that you don't talk about. I definitely knew some of them. I knew the Lyle Waterson song. That's from one of my favourite albums of all time, Bright Phoebus. Bee Gees are one of my favourite groups of all time. Brian Prothero. What else? I should have it in front of me, shouldn't I? I've got my liner notes in front of me.
So as we talk, I've not seen any of this stuff yet, obviously, because the LP's not out in the world. So I don't know what you've written and how much detail there is or anything.
It's about 3,000 words long. It's a bit of a mega essay. I mean, I felt like I should have known. There's a beautiful song called Clive's Song by Hamish Imlach, but was written by Clive Palmer of the Incredible String Band. And that's very much the sort of thing I ought to know, because all that kind of like jazz and blues kind of guitar revival stuff by Bert Jansch and John Rembold, I just love. But I didn't. And similarly, I didn't know there's a mountain song called One Last Cold Kiss, which was popularized by Christy Moore. And I think that's the version that Paul was working off. Didn't know that. White Line Fever by Flying Burrito Bros. Fantastic. Very happy to see that he did that. But most of the songs are really not very well known. And I sort of think that, and that's really as I understand it, his sort of reason for doing the album, you know, to sort of like celebrate these songs, to sort of pay it forward and bring them to wider attention. It's a sort of celebration of the songs, I think. I think that's where he's coming from with it.
He talks about a lot of these songs being introduced to him from other people. There might be a little text from Noel Gallagher and people like that. I'd imagine like you're doing all that type of thing with each other. Were any of the songs recommendations from you in the first place? Can you remember?
No. Well, I have recommended songs to him that he's loved. I think we spoke about Bright Phoebus before, but I don't think he got that from me. I seem to recall him mentioning there was a Lyle Waterson compilation called Never the Same, which I think he might have bought from Honest John's, possibly. I'm very proud to say that many years ago, I introduced him to Richard Hawley, because there was a Richard Hawley song on a CDR I did for him in 2005. Just after I first met, well, on the day I first met him, I handed that CDR over to him because it was a sort of thing I did when I interviewed people. I used to do little mixtapes and mix CDs for them, just as a sort of mark of respect of the fact that they're musicians. And it was just my way of saying, look, I'm here to talk to you about the music. We're both fans, hopefully. And so, of course, I'm under no illusions, but most people I interview don't get a chance to go away and listen to them. Paul is not like that. He called me a week later. He sort of had questions about things I'd put on there. And there's a very beautiful, but obscure, but very beautiful song by an American musician who's no longer with us. It's sort of like an acoustic blues thing. The singer was called Ernie Payne. The song was called Curse of Ham, and that really blew him away. And the other one that he asked about, it was a track from the Cole's Corner album, which had just been released by Richard. I mean, at some point, those two were always going to become friends. You know, it's nice to be able to say that the first time he heard him was through myself.
Oh, how lovely. Yeah. Well, Richard's in the book, and I interviewed Richard as well, which will turn into a podcast at some time. It's going to be the only podcast, I think, where I'll have to release two versions. One for people who don't mind this proper swearing. Others for the one where I edit it out, because there was a lot.
Good company, Richard. He's really, really funny.
Yeah, he's brilliant. Absolutely. There were a couple of songs that I've experienced from being actually in the studio and also from talking to Paul. So let's talk about these as well. So when I interviewed Paul for the book recently, and he talked about and said, go away and listen to the original Where There's Smoke, There's Fire.
Yes.
Because he's going, it's like all the instruments are out of tune. It like shouldn't work. It sounds terrible, but it works. And I was like, what's he on about? And I found it on YouTube. And it's like, oh my God, it's like everything's out of tune, right? The original.
I know, it's almost a kind of Les Dawson quality to it.
It's bizarre. But I'm like, how did he get? I should have asked him. How did you get? Like, who sent you that? Go and have a listen to this. It's great, you know. Or you thought I've got to cover it, you know.
It's good. The original's good. It's got that kind of. I really love songs that have that, where you know you'd never deliberately make them sound like that, but somehow the song emerges intact in spite of what the people who wrote it and performed it have attempted to do to it. There's a beautiful. I was talking to him about this. There's a song by a Nigerian group called Ofege, Ofege. Just one of my favourite songs of all time. The album's called Try to Love. The song's called It's So Easy, and it's just this lovely sort of tender ballad. They're very young. I think they were teenagers when they recorded it. So it's their attempt to almost sort of like writing what they felt like a classic love song, but the mix is just like all over the place. There's this guitar that seems to be crudely dubbed over the top of it, or that's twice as loud as everything else, but it just somehow enhances its charm. If you did a cover version of it, you wouldn't do that, because it's, you know, you're essentially replicating something that wasn't deliberate, but it's charming.
One other one I was lucky enough to speak this week actually to Martin Carthy. Was chatting about him and his new album, was talking about his connections with Paul, and we talked about Never the Same, which you mentioned a bit earlier on, the Lyle Waterson song. He said to me that Paul texted him or rang him and asked if he could write out the lyrics for him, which I thought was brilliant. And then to Martin then texted him the lyrics. What was the other one I'd heard? Oh, I was also in the studio. I was really lucky to be in the studio when Steve Cradock was doing putting the bass down on Small Town Talk.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah, of course, Small Town Talk's on there. Yeah, God, yeah, that's another one I knew. I love that song so much. It's just brilliant. And I'm really glad, but I was really happy when I saw the track listing and he'd done that. It's a lovely version. It's got a sort of almost kind of dubby kind of tint to it. I just think that's a great song. That's a really timeless sentiment, that song. I wasn't surprised when my youngest daughter, who's a musician and a singer-songwriter, and when she was in her mid-teens, she overheard me playing it, and she just got obsessed with it. And I can sort of see why someone of a younger generation would get obsessed with it, because it's very relevant to that sort of very social media-centric world of like things can really get out of control. People can gossip about you. People can really come for you in a way that maybe maybe wouldn't have quite done decades before. And you've really just got to say the voice in that song. I love that song because it's just sort of saying, well, haters are gonna hate, as the proverb goes. And, you can't really control what negative people do, but, you sort of like, you just kind of look after what's important, and they can just go their merry way and do their thing. And when I hear Small Town Talk now, that's kind of what I think about. But of course, when it was written 50 whatever years ago, it was written in a very different world. But technology changes, but people still doing the same things. And it's really good to sort of, remember that.
How much did Paul talk to you about the projects before he asked you about the liner notes? You were obviously aware that he was going to do a covers album, although we're talking about it almost as more of a reimaginings album, which is interesting. But a lot of people, as soon as they heard that, and Paul talked to me on the podcast about the fact he was going to do this kind of covers, if you like, thought we were going to get Studio 152, if you know what I mean. Couldn't be any further away from that in a way, could it?
No, well, Studio 150, I think, was recorded at a pretty hedonistic time, shall we say. So it was just Paul playing some of his favourite songs, which of course is what this is. But this has been very lovingly and carefully put together, and Paul's worked really, really hard to sort of get into the kind of space that he needs to be to really do justice to these vocals. Because in a way, you're sort of really setting yourself up. If it's your own song, I'm guessing that you've just got your kind of own sort of thing to take care of. You're trying to do your best Paul Weller vocal. But I guess there may be a part of you that is really sort of trying to honour the original, honour the people that made it. And you can really hear the work. It's a very, very carefully and lovingly put together album. Hannah Peel's string arrangements, where they are there, are just wonderful. Everyone's put so much into it. I know Steve Cradock really sort of took it really seriously, that this was the first record for Paul that he's produced. And he really sort of sweated over it. He really carried that weight very conscientiously.
He's playing so many of the instruments, a lot of it done in his studio in Devon, right? And he talked to me a bit about that as well. It was almost like Paul handed him the project in a way, gave him the track listing and kind of asked him to work his magic in a way, right?
Yeah, and I think, it's a real sort of testament to the almost sort of psychic bond that those two have now. It works really, really well. Stevie's two things at once. He's contemporary. They've been and worked together for decades now. But, I would think, I'm guessing, but I think there will always be a part of Steve as well that, that he was a fan, as we all were, So you're sort of like trying to do justice to two things at once as well. You take it really, really seriously, for all of those reasons, because I guess at some level it's kind of his life's been building up to it. Amongst other things, he's got loads of things going on, Steve, but of course, it's a huge undertaking.
This album feels very different to what's come in recent years, things like 66 and On Sunset Fat Pop that had these big marketing campaigns. This one's very much more low-key, under the radar. They're not doing a huge amount of that stuff. They're not going to tour it. He's not playing this LP live, is what he said, which is, as a fan, I was like, oh, what, really? Come on. But it's a really fallow year in a touring sense, because he just wants to reset in a way. So it is the album. That's pretty much all we're going to get. Although we have had a video. I saw this week's a video.
Lordy Roller.
Which we've not talked about, actually. We should touch on that song as well, Lordy Roller. Was that one that you knew beforehand?
No, I didn't know Lordy Roller at all. I know, obviously, I did my research. There's not much to know. It's a French band called the Gorillas, as in Guerilla. Apparently, Manu Dibango was in them. And I think that's the only thing they did. So it was done in the late 60s. I don't know how it came to Paul's attention. Again, I think through these late night kind of this YouTube texting back and forth business, which is actually it's a lovely thing. It's a nice thing actually when you wake up in the morning and there are like 3 texts from Paul with different
I'm still waiting for this because this came up so often on the podcast, the amount of people who talked about this. And I thought when I get to interview him finally, I'll be in that little text club. Nothing, Pete.
I'll give it time. I mean, it's a sort of, what I like about it is sometimes it becomes like a game of ping pong. So he sends you something and that reminds you of something that you want him to hear. And so I love that way of listening to music, because we're a lot older. We've got commitments. We can't just kind of like go around each other's houses and sort of like sit in each other's like rooms and sit on the end of the bed and play each other. Those days are long gone. They're never coming back, I don't think. But it's a sort of a little bit of a kind of return to that. It's just nice. Once in a while, there's something I know he'll sort of love. There's an album by an Indonesian group called Lair, which it's spelled Lair, and they are just amazing. And it's just this kind of otherworldly, it's very psychedelic, but it's super melodic, very like quite rough and ready. It's just like it's dropped in from another cosmos. And I sort of knew he'd love that. And he did, So it's just that back and forth. And then we went record shopping at the beginning of last year because he was around my neck of the woods. He came over to do an interview around 66. And he got me a couple of jazz records. I'm trying to remember what they were now. It'll come back to me. And I got him a couple of reggae records. I got him Fu Manchu by Desmond Dekker, which is probably one of my top 20 favourite tracks of all time. But he hadn't heard it. And it's just one of those where, like, you just know you'd have to be dead not to love it. And then I got him the Heptones album, Party Time, one of the greatest albums of all time. Absolutely, I'm not exaggerating. I literally mean it. It's literally one of the greatest albums of all time, and every home should have one.
Yeah, no, it's produced by Lee Scratch Perry, that one, wasn't it?
Indeed, yeah. And it's got, it starts with Party Time, which is simultaneously the most carefree. It's kind of carefree, but it's also really sad in a weird way. It's kind of because it's about a moment and all moments have to end. But it's also got the best version of the definitive version of I Shall Be Released, which I'll listen to over anyone else's version, even Bob Dylan's.
Yeah, I took your advice, actually, when I did the interview with Paul. A lot of people said this on the podcast as well. Either do a mixtape or take some music that you like, you think he might like. I took Creation Rebel, because I'm massively into unused sounds, so I took Creation Rebel and African Head Charge. Paul's never mentioned it since. I was like, I don't think you like those.
Well, I think sometimes, I've had this, sometimes you take something home and you you put it down, and then next time you go and look for it, there's about 30 other records on top of where you thought you'd left it. And it's not even there anymore. It's actually somewhere else. And then 3 years later, you pick it up again. But hey, wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't a Paul Weller, Adrian Sherwood collaboration be?
I said this to him. They met at the Manor, Paul said to me. They met in the Manor back in the 90s.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but I know I'd love to hear that, man. That would be amazing.
Because that would be that wouldn't be dissimilar, really, to, the kind of the Brendan Lynch kind of sound collisions back in the day. And for me, the version of Cosmos on the B-side of Sunflower, people talk about Screamadelica and Higher Than the Sun and all that. Fine, it's great. But God, if you want to hear that kind of thing nailed, you've got to hear that version of Cosmos.
Yeah. Let me ask you about Daughtry Street as well, because this was something we connected about where you were trying to get hold of Jake Fletcher.
He sent me a very, very nice long text. He told me how it came about. It's a very beautiful song. He wrote it when he was still playing with the Grammotones. For me, it's one of those songs that I put it up there with, like, Meet on the Ledge by Fairport Convention, obviously written by Richard Thompson. Or, there's a song written by Billy Strayhorn, Lush Life, which is this very premature, world-weary ballad about the sort of emptiness of kind of one-night stands at come-what-may places in the company of girls with sad, sullen, grey faces. These songs which are really old before their time, and probably the person that wrote them doesn't really understand what plane they just imperceptibly switched to when they kind of came out of this thing. It's like you're in a visionary state. If you can write a song like that, I think you just enter a visionary state. So it's about a song in Oldham called Daughtry Street, and he just saw the sign, and it used to be like a long street, but most of it's been knocked down, and so it now leads to, it's a tiny road that leads to an industrial estate, maybe about 50 yards long, and there's nothing in it. So he let his imagination wander, Jake, and he just kind of imagined all the people that had come and gone and worked in the cotton mills. It's such a beautiful song. P.P. Arnold obviously did it on her album, The New Adventures of, which Steve produced. So I guess it was Paul's turn to do it next. I think it's the only song on the album that was written in this century, as far as I'm
looking down the list. I think you could be right. Yeah, you are. You are right.
I think so, yeah. But really, just a beautiful, beautiful song. And, it really speaks to that thing of when you're growing up, what are you going to do? You sort of you've got a million possible futures and you've got to choose one. And there's a point in your life where, do I just move away from home? Do I move to a bigger city or something and see what waits for me there? Or do I sort of stay? And, either way, you wonder what might have been. You wonder what would happen if you'd stayed. You wonder what would happen if you'd left. And it really speaks to that kind of moment in your life where you're sort of you're kind of at the mercy of fortune, really. You don't really know what you're ultimately going to do. I love it for all those reasons. It's a really beautiful song.
We mentioned Pinball earlier on. We should talk about this because obviously it's the flip side of that single that we talked about as well. This is probably the most well-known song on the album, I would guess, or maybe the Bee Gees. But a song that Noel Gallagher introduced to Paul, I gather. I don't know how true that is. And it was Morrissey who introduced Noel to it as well. I don't know if you knew that. Were you asking Paul about these songs when you were doing the liner notes, or was it more that actually you just went away and did your own research?
No, I interviewed him about it as well. And,
okay.
Yeah, we spoke about them. First song that I knew he was going to do was Never the Same. I think he might have sent me a sound clip of it like over a year ago now, give me a sort of an indication of what he was sort of working on. But Pinball, there's a couple of songs on the album that are, I sort of paired it up in my head with Nobody's Fool, which is a song written by Ray Davis, which was the theme to Budgie. Songs which really capture that early 70s moment of, life being a little bit kind of unforgiving and just that sort of what's going to happen to me. That I think about London. I mean, they're both sort of, Brian Prothero, I think, was just had a relationship end and he was staying in with a friend in Covent Garden, I think. In my head, I can imagine the old market, the old Covent Garden market. You wake up at midday and you look out your window and you just see people getting on with their day and you're in an in-between place. And Budgie's a bit like that as well. The character that Adam Faith plays, he doesn't really belong anywhere. And of course, the interesting thing is, in terms of Paul covering those songs, is what was Paul doing in his life at the time? He was in his early teens, I think. He would have been about 13, maybe. And so it reminds me of a lot of the songs that I really loved, that I was really identifying with at that age. I remember being obsessed with Highland Hard Rain by Aztec Camera. And if you think about a lot of the songs on that record, they're sort of about screwing up. Am I going to be all right? They're almost like a romanticizing an imminent kind of moment where you screw your life up and you never get it back. What does the world have in store for me? I think maybe that's the part of him that identified with those songs.
It's always nice as well to see who are the other people involved. You mentioned Hannah Peel early on, but Noel's on the album, Declan O'Rourke, who I absolutely love, and Amelia Coburn. Let's talk about those two. So Declan opens the album actually on Handouts in the Rain with Paul. And actually Paul's recently covered Galileo, which was lovely to hear as well. But Declan's a real talent, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, his voice, I recognise his voice sort of straight away. He's got such a singular voice. I love the way these disparate talents sort of appear in Paul's musical world. There are so many amazing cameos on this record. It's a great song because it's unfortunately, it's a very timeless song. It's about the human cost of war and decisions made on behalf of ordinary people that are sort of just trying to live their lives.
Absolutely. One of the other huge talents on the album is Amelia Coburn, and the podcast episode coming up with her in the next couple of weeks. And she's delightful. What a talent. And you're like this. Steve Cradock said to me that he thinks Paul Weller found her by Googling his own name because she did a cover of Tube Station.
Wow.
I think it was actually John from Shindig. I think he introduced, if I remember rightly, I'm reading that.
Don't Google your own name. That's like, God, that pathologized disaster. Anyway, I'm glad some good came of it.
But she's there. I mean, I love her. It's a bit. She's coming on the podcast actually, so nice to chat with her as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a lot of sort of folky things on this record, and I think it's certainly one of Paul's big rabbit holes that he's kind of returned to this century has been that sort of not straight down the line folk a lot of the time, but kind of folk, sort of either be it kind of folk rock or, if you want to call it acid folk or psych folk or, bastardizations of folk of one kind or another, primarily from the British Isles. It's funny, there's not been much evidence of it percolating into his music until now. And I guess now it has because of the songs he's chosen to do. They're not his songs.
I remember when last year Supplement 66 came out and people were going, Paul's going to be rocking out. I hope Paul's rocking out. And let's go, no, he's not rocking. This is not that one. This is a similar thing, right? If people were loving heavy soul, sonic kicks and that, couldn't be further removed. But actually his vocals have never sounded any better, have they? It's unbelievable, his voice at the minute.
He just becomes like a more and more expressive with every passing record. It's like a tree, isn't it? It just assumes new kind of texture and character as it gets older. It's not trying to be the voice that it once was. It's playing to the strengths that it has now, and the strengths that it has now, it didn't have then. It's a continuum. He's really worked hard on this record. You can really hear that.
Must mention as well the imagery of the album. I love the album cover. Fabulous. There's also photos inside from Dean Chalkley, who's been on the podcast recently. These beautiful shots of Paul. He just looks so cool. For a man who's now a pensioner, the fact that he still cares about what he looks like.
If we had some of the couturiers and tailors on speed dial that he has, then we'd look a lot better as well.
There is that. You talked earlier about being such a massive fan of the Bee Gees, which I was going to say surprised, but I don't know why. But I think when we think about the Bee Gees, we think Saturday Night Fever and You Win Again, which actually obviously great. But you love the whole thing. But I saw Paul do I Started a Joke with Catherine Williams and Steve Brooks at a little church in Liverpool for like a charity gig a couple of Christmases ago, which was a lovely version. But did he talk to you about why he picked that? Because that is a relatively well-known song as well, right? I suppose.
Well, he loves it, obviously. He said that it was a lyric that he wished he'd written. He thinks it's like the lyric especially, I think he thought it was genius. And he almost felt like, if I remember rightly, I think he almost felt like he could have or almost like should have written that lyric. It was almost within his reach, perhaps, to have written a lyric like that. It's such a clever song and written by such a young man. I mean, again, we go back to Daltrey Street and Jake, it's a song that you listen to it. And, Robin was a teenager when he wrote that song.
Really? Right.
Fucking hell. Like, when I was the age he was when he wrote that song, I could barely put my trousers on the right way around, And he wrote I Started a Joke. It's just ridiculous, Great, a beautiful song.
You talked about Clive's song a little while ago, and obviously the little surprise, Robert Plant. Do you know the story? He was meant to just turn up and do harmonica, but ended up doing backing vocals. Is that right?
I didn't know that. I know that he really got on famously with everyone because obviously there's that kind of West Midlands connection with Steve Cradock as well. And he's one of those people who, I've never met him, but by all accounts, he's just obsessed with music and he's relentlessly trying to learn and discover things. He's a lot like Paul. Both own a jukebox, so there's that connection as well. Oh, by the way, yeah, and talking of jukeboxes, there's another great song on there, If I Was a King by White Plains, which is on Paul's jukebox at Black Barn.
How did you know that?
I'd like to say I was observant enough to have noticed it, but I found a Spotify playlist. I think it's just called Paul Weller's Jukebox, and someone's basically written down every single single that's on Paul's jukebox and made a Spotify playlist of it. And it's really, really good, and I could recommend everyone go and follow it and listen to it. But again, well, the White Plains track is another one which I think is a real insight into the 13-year-old Paul. You could really sort of a picture sort of starts to emerge of this slightly introspective, sweet sort of kid who was really sort of, what was he seeing in these songs? But yeah, Robert Plant. And also there's a real parallel here as well, because I think that in a way, the album that Find El Dorado reminds me of the most is Raising Sand by Robert Plant and Alison Krauss. That, in a way, I think that was an album that comes from the same impulse. These are some songs we really like. Most of them are not very well known. If we can bring them to wider attention and celebrate them, then that's our job here, our work here is done. There's a kind of nice kismet about the fact that Robert's on the record, because those two records, Paul's record and Robert and Alison Krauss's record, I think they come from the same place, the same impulse. Yeah, I'm glad they're on there.
The title track, Find El Dorado, similar thing really in terms of I think Paul wanted to introduce other people to this music. And actually, as we speak, Paul's in Ireland with the family of Eamon Friel, the guy who did the original El Dorado song, who's sadly no longer with us, passed away a few years back.
I found out it was originally written for an Irish film that was made in the 1980s. I can't remember exactly what year. It's a film about basically these two guys, these two friends, and one of them's getting ready to get married. The other one is sort of insecure about their friendship coming to an end or this kind of impairing their friendship. So Find El Dorado, insofar as I can see, is a song sort of written to that sort of slight sense of sadness that things have to change. And you can't, like I said before, sadly, we can't spend our whole lives going to each other's rooms and playing each other new records. We can maybe do it once in a while. But
You've made me miss those days so much now. That's all I'm thinking about, man. those were great days. Because I remember doing that with the first Paul Weller album, the solo one, me and my mate.
That's why I've got a radio show, because basically I can sort of do it virtually. I can just pretend I'm at someone's house kind of playing records. So I think it sort of comes from that place. So it's a little bit like there's got a slight whatever happened to the Likely Lads vibes about it. Beautiful song. The version he does is just so beautiful as well. Yeah. Who would have known, in the wider world, who knows that song really? No one really, as far as I know, knows that song. So for that to... And for the fact that, Paul told me that he was like, of course, I had to sort of check it with his family. I was trying to make sure they were all right with me doing it on the record. I just looked at him. I think they're probably okay with you. I had quite a funny thing. Have we got a couple of minutes to this?
Yeah, go on. Yeah.
So I was talking to him. I was interviewing him for the liner notes earlier in the year. So two things. First of all, when I go to the gym, I'm constantly making playlists to kind of distract me from my own misery. And I made a playlist about a year ago that had This Old House by Shakin' Stevens on it.
Banger.
I love that song, and I love everything about it. Now, if you haven't heard This Old House, like since the 80s, and you think it sounds shit, go back and listen to it. The musicianship on it is brilliant. Look at the credits. It's got loads of really shit hot musicians. The production is amazing. The guitar is it's like Carl Perkins playing the guitar. There is nothing at all wrong with This Old House. It's a really, really brilliant record. So, then I found the album that it came from in a charity shop, and I bought that, and that's really, everything on the album is great. It's just like top-notch musicianship. And I went into a Shaky rabbit hole. I found a Smash Hits interview from the early 80s, and Shaky's sort of talking about his kind of method for like making records, for choosing songs. And he's sort of saying, I never pick a really obvious song. I always choose a record that never came out here, or if it did come out here, it wasn't a hit. So like no one really knows, hardly anyone's heard This Old House. And then, Green Door, it was a hit for Frankie Vaughan, but didn't do very well. So, so that way I can sort of like bring them to people's attention. And so anyway, so Paul's telling me about what he's trying to do with this record. And he sort of say, not many people know these songs. So, I'm sort of like, hopefully I'm bringing them to people's wider attention. And when you can hear the words coming out of your mouth and you're paralyzed, you're kind of powerless to stop them. And it was like an out-of-body experience. I could just hear my mouth say, "Oh, that's really interesting," because Shakin' Stevens did that with his This Old House album. And like Paul looks at me slightly quizzically, as if to say, "Have you just compared me to Shakin' Stevens?" And I guess I had.
To be fair, they both look brilliant in a denim jacket,
Deal with it, Paul.
Oh, wonderful. That's amazing. What a great story. One other thing I wanted to mention is, and you said this to me, and many people said this to me, but when you interview Paul Weller, he's going to be interested in the project or whatever, but he's going to want to talk about what's next. Ask him what's next, because he's already on to the next thing. He's already thinking that way. I got a different sense this time around from my conversations.
Yeah, I think he knew he was going to do this when when I interviewed him for 66. I think he knew that this was going to be his next move. I think this time around, I think he's just sort of enjoying. Well, it might have changed since the last time I saw him, but I think he's enjoying not knowing. I think it's easy to forget, but he's got young kids, and, it's knackering. As you and I both know, it's knackering trying to sort of like do your job and all of that. And he did a really long tour last year. Obviously, the last time he did a covers album, Studio 150, that was partly a result of the fact that he did new songs weren't really coming to him very much. So it was sort of a reset. And after that, we got As Is Now, right? And for me, As Is Now is such a wonderful record. I don't think people go on about that record enough. And I think it was quite significant that that was the record that came after a period of relatively few songs. This time around, I don't think Paul is particularly trying to hurry the songwriting process along. I think he's been around long enough to know that when the songs really start coming, he's not going to be able to stop them anyway. So I think he's just leaning into it a bit more and, enjoying his life. He's a lovely guy. Not everyone is always like massively appreciative of the fact that they're here and they're basically, well, and they're surrounded by people who love them. But he sort of he really is like that. And and in my life, I try and be like that as well. So I appreciate the effort.
Now, the time of release of this podcast, Pete, here we are, Uncut magazine cover story. I mean, that's always a buzz, being the man on the cover story, right? It doesn't happen every month, right?
Yeah, and with Paul, it's if you'd asked me 6 or 8 months ago, have you got another cover story in you on Paul? I would have said, I don't think I do, I think I'm not sure, with the best will in the world, is there enough new stuff? But to be honest, that's more a statement reflecting my sort of lack of self-confidence as much as anything else. I'm constantly like tricking myself into sort of, I don't know, I always make things more difficult for myself than I need to. But the bottom line is I thought, well, if Paul's happy to have me kind of, tag along with him, ask him more questions, if Paul's not sick of the sight of me yet, then I'll have a go. And I'm so glad I did, actually, because as you know, he's so brilliant with his time, and people seem to be responding to this interview maybe more than any interview I've done with him for a very long time.
There's lots of insights, some of which we've talked about and touched on in this episode, actually, but there were a few things I wanted to particularly hone in on, right? So one is talk a bit about the Jam legacy and this revelation that he's looking at the 50th anniversary. This is a guy who doesn't tend to look back, but here we are, the 50th anniversary coming up in a couple of years' time, and he's talking box sets. You're like, whoa, hold on, what?
I was quite excited when he said that because I didn't know that was happening, so I had nothing to. Not like there was anything for me to fish for, I was just sitting there listening to what he had to say, really. I was as excited about it as the next fan. I think it's early days. He clearly needs to go through the audio, see what there is, see what he feels comfortable releasing. But that's very nice. So I think that shows he's at a point where he wants to acknowledge, these decades of loyalty that people have had in him. And he doesn't take that lightly, as long as he does it on his own terms. And I think it's also about giving respect to people that are a part of his story, which as a result of your book, people will be more acutely aware of than ever. So I thought that's quite a classy thing to do. I think he's doing it not so much from a place of nostalgia, but from a place of giving props to people who have helped him along his way.
You mentioned the book. This is such a buzz, man. I'm reading the interview, and then there's a little mention of it in the conversation and everything, where you've referenced my book. And you're one of the few people who's got to see this thing at final proof stage, Pete. So, which is an honor in itself, man. But yeah, you actually bring it up.
I'd be a bit of an arsehole basically, your book is the reason we know this amazing story about the lion. The fact that, should we tell, if you've read Uncut, there's a story about Paul almost being mauled by a lion before the Jam had even become famous. It is like something out of Only Fools and Horses. But I wouldn't know about that story had it not been for your book. So I'm not going to be a dick and not mention your book and yet having sort of taken one of your stories. So it's one of many, many reasons why we have to be profoundly grateful to you for your incredible work on that. Yeah, he was in a good place. That interview, I'm really fond of that interview because he's very relaxed. He told some really good stories.
He does seem to be that kind of person. I've seen some interviews where back in the day, he was really hard work to interview. I'm glad I didn't have to do any of those. But he's such a kind of welcoming to any kind of question from what I can work out.
Unless you're a moron, Bottom line with Paul is, first and foremost, you have to love music, and he has to know you're a music lover, and he has to know that you have that joy for the next new thing that is going to blow your mind. If he knows you've got that thing there, then it's sort of you're going to get somewhere, That's really nice. So I think that's the kind of foundation of any sort of decent conversation or any decent sort of. I don't want to be presumptuous enough to call it a friendship, but I hope there's some kind of friendship there.
No, 100%, man, 100%. I don't want to spoil this. I want people to go and buy it, and I want them to have the same reaction that I had when reading it. I had two reactions where I was like, oh my God, I'm mentioned. Hold on. that got emotional. But there's another key bit where I got really emotional. And I think if you follow this story and you follow this journey from day one as a fan of the Jam, you're gonna feel something. You might be furious, but you're gonna feel something. You ask the question that everybody wants to know the answer to. I'm not going to spoil how Paul responded to that, but was that something you had to kind of take a run up to? Was it in your mind that you wanted to ask him about that?
I think it briefly, because this interview takes place over 3, or if you include the bit where I went record shopping with him, 4 different encounters. And the final 2 encounters happened after Rick passed away. The penultimate of those, it was just too soon. You sort of could feel it was sort of too soon to really go into any detail. And the next one, we were sort of... we just got into it very naturally. I don't think I even really... I'm not one of those journalists who really pushes. As the interviewee, you know what you want to talk about. You know what you're kind of happy to talk about. So it just kind of naturally sort of fell round to there because, he's been around a lot of illness and mortality, Paul, and he's very sanguine about it. He's not a maudlin person. He understands that, to be blunt about it, death is a part of life. And I think it kind of informs a somewhat of a spiritual kind of bent to the way he lives his life these days, that, you really have to be sort of grateful for every day. And with Rick, let's not go into too much detail because, anyone who walks into a newsagent these days will know how few magazines there are left. And we really have to, if we like having magazines, if we like reading music magazines, we have to support them by buying them.
Yeah.
But the years go by very quickly, and sometimes we don't sort of get to have conversations that maybe, in retrospect, we would have liked to have had. And we've all been there. We all have regrets. Yeah, it's just a sad thing, but there's a lot of love. There's a lot of shared history. I won't say anything more about what he said, but there's a sort of thing that came up that I said in response to what he said. And I said, lately, I've kind of I've gotten around to thinking that really by the time we're about, I don't know, 10, 15, I can't remember what number I said. I think we're pretty much 80% of the person will always be. I didn't always think that, but I do think that these days. I sort of think, and so
meaning like late teens kind of thing. It's like you're already 80% there. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think basically, you're already formed, and so the people that shared that part of your life with you are sort of there too. The good thing about that is we can carry them with us, even if we outlive them. But it also sort of means that maybe people who we didn't stay in touch with, they're actually, we realize very late down the line that actually they really are there inside us, and see where I'm coming from on that, right?
No, absolutely. I think that, yeah. One other thing with buying the physical magazine is you get the CD as well. Here we go.
Yeah, amazing.
Loads of little rarities, all the parlophone stuff that maybe was on kind of downloads or lost on a deluxe album or whatever, which is lovely. So it's always nice to hear as well. But I mean, I love print. I still miss to this day Q magazine not arriving through my letterbox every day. So I'd encourage people, rather than sharing it in the forums and all that, folks, get out and buy the magazine and support Uncut, because it's a wonderful thing. Not least because you'll get your first snippet plug of the book that's coming this September. So I still can't believe that. It's brilliant. My mum was very proud.
The unfollow-upable oral history. I mean,
well,
really, the kind of like, no, anyone else who was thinking of writing a book about Paul might want to just sort of like do something else instead. History.
Oh, you're too kind. I'm pleased to say the kebab story was in there.
I was surprised to see, because that takes up a whole page, and I know how many people you interviewed. So for the kebab story to earn its place in the book, I was very
There was a line you said, like, let me try and remember it exactly word for word. You were basically implying like Paul Weller was like somebody who'd won a Paul Weller competition.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember this line?
Because I've repeated it since, because I just think that is kind of what I love about him. He's like someone who's won a competition to spend a day being the lead singer of Paul Weller's band. But that's how I think of him. It just happens to be him.
But no, wonderful story. But yeah, thank you, man. So yes, out this September.
It's a humdinger. It is absolutely because he's never going to write an autobiography. So this is it. I think it's the definitive, exhaustive story, and it's a complete vindication of all the good faith and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours you put into interviewing all those people, because you didn't do it for money. You did it purely out of love and enthusiasm, and I just love it when people do things for the right reason. And that bears fruit. Best thing in the world,
Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm rooting for you all the way.
Well, look, we'll get the book launch in soon and we'll have a beer over it and celebrate. But this has been a delight. Thanks, man. Really appreciate it.
Not at all. Always a pleasure. Take care.
My thanks once again to Pete Paphides for joining me on the podcast. Do check out that Uncut magazine in the shops right now. Go and buy your copy. Support brilliant music journalism like Uncut magazine and the stuff that Pete and Michael Bonner and the team there produce month in, month out. So important to support those guys. We'd be lost without those magazines, right? It's a great cover CD as well from Parlophone. So check it out. Uncut magazine available right now. You'll also find a fabulous little piece in there about the book. Really honoured. So thank you to those guys as well for including a little snippet of my upcoming book, Paul Weller, Dancing Through the Fire, the authorised oral history. Is available for pre-order right now. Check out Uncut magazine for a little sampler. And I should mention, of course, Find El Dorado, out this coming Friday. The new Paul Weller album, released 25th of July, 2025. So if you haven't yet pre-ordered your copy, grab it right now. Hey, look, I've really enjoyed this episode. Thanks so much for listening. If you want to support, do share it on social media. It all helps to spread the word. And if you fancy buying a virtual coffee, you can go to my store, paulwellerfanpodcast.com. Chuck us £3 for a virtual coffee as a little thanks. Be really appreciated. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you next time.